We're watching Beth off stage doing the Egyptian dance along with the intro music. Okay, here you go. Let's see. Come on. Okay. Oh, we've got, this is Progressive Soup, and I'm David Stevenson. We have Emily Volpentesta, co-host, and Peter Mullin, who goes by, I believe, Pete the Poet. Now, why are we feeling up Pete's hands? Well, there's a reason for that. Pete also does fine cabinetry, and there's a way that we can connect fine cabinetry and poetry, and we're going to find out about that. So first of all, we have to disconnect our hands one from the other.
Okay. And you might be wondering why. Do you want to tell why we were looking at Pete's hands?
Would you like to?
Well, no. I was just saying how I went to a palmist, and he said you could tell a lot by looking at someone's hands as to what kind of work that they do. And I was saying that Pete, you have hands that look like someone who works with their hands, like me. As a massage therapist, and her hands are very similar, so, okay.
You know, the shape of the hands, you mentioned the shape of the hands, too.
Right, someone who works with their hands tend to have palms that are square, and their fingers are short in relation to...
Right. That's weird.
In relation to the palm, and when you put their fingers together, there's no spaces in between.
Yeah, they don't look too bad now.
Right.
But, yeah, sometimes when I'm working with stone, they're all beat up, and you know exactly what kind of work I do.
Right.
Sometimes they're like sandpaper, and they get caught on my clothes, and you can hear them.
What's the worst kind of material for your hands? What does the most damage to your skin?
The cold, the winter. More than anything I work with, the winter will make my fingers split open and bleed. This is the dryness.
More so than any type of material. Okay.
Yeah, and then cement would be the worst material. I think it's the lime and the cement.
I was in Yale for about 10 years, so I know all about that. I was just, stupid me. I was doing a back step of my house on Highland Avenue, and I did, sure, why not throw a little cement in there, and then about 2 days later, my nail was almost gone.
Oh.
So, so it took like 10 years to come back, too. It was weird. So, how does this tie in with poetry?
Well, I do a lot of painting and repetitive jobs, like roofing, where you have a lot of time to just drift away and think about things, and that's when I do a lot of writing during the work day, and actually a lot of writing comes during the commuting time, when my mind's kind of in neutral. But yeah, I do a lot of writing. I come up with ideas while I'm working.
So as a craftsman, in fact, what you're doing is multitasking.
Yeah, well, you have to. When you're doing construction, you're doing a lot of different things anyway.
How did you learn your craft?
Kind of fell into it. When I was looking to get married, I was engaged. We needed some income. I was doing odd jobs before that, and I just knew that I enjoyed working with wood, building things. At that time, wasn't too much long after I'd been building forts. I was 19, and I just went to a job that was a house that was being built on the street, and asked the guy, "You need any help?" And I started the following Monday working for him, and that was in '72, I believe. And I started working 2 stories up on a wood shingle roof in 95 degree weather. That was my introduction to the carpentry.
So you kind of started at the bottom and worked your way up, so to speak.
Yeah, and I jumped right in and worked as an apprentice for a Norwegian builder out of Katona, and learned a lot. It was just myself and him, so I learned to do everything he was doing. I wasn't just doing a laborer's job. I was doing everything, just like him.
See, I'm watching Peter's lovely wife Beth off stage, and she's nodding. So we know that you're doing a good job. You've got the seal of approval from Beth. What do you do with poetry? Why poetry? You could think about a lot of different things while you're doing jobs that don't require you to actually be focused visually or mentally on what you're doing. How did poetry play into it?
Well, I only worked for other builders for a few years, and then I've always worked by myself, for myself, for 25, 30 years now. And so I'm alone all day long.
Right.
And I always enjoyed poetry, but working alone, you can kind of stew things in your head and express things. In other words, a lot of other people who work with people, they express their ideas to their co-workers.
Right.
They vent during the day to the people they work with. I have customers to talk to, but really no co-workers. I'll go the whole day and not say a word. Work 8 hours on the roof and not say a word. So sometimes the expression is written, and I enjoy it. It works for me.
So in your case, you have your patients that you talk to when you have that conversation. But I guess, you know...
Some people don't like to talk.
Really?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. That seems odd.
Right.
Read us a poem. I want to hear a poem.
Okay. This, I guess I should hold it up this way.
Yeah.
This is it's a roof shingle, a cedar roof shingle from a job I just finished. It was a cottage whose roof actually caught on fire. And so I was called in. And this shingle was one of 2 layers of shingles, so there were actually 40 or 50 years worth of shingles on this roof. And I always look at something like that and I just think, what happened during those 40 or 50 years at this property or to, you know, it's like wood has, and building materials have a life of their own. And this particular one is worn thin. I have it mounted on top of a brand new one, and you can see it's half as... The weather has worn it almost through.
Wow.
The lighter colored one is actually what the darker colored one looked like?
Yeah. I mean, the thin one started out thick as that.
Wow.
I've seen shingles that are worn completely through, and they're like paper.
Wow.
Because they've been up there for 50 years. It's a soft wood, cedar. And so a lot of times I see wood as a living thing, because it was a tree, it was a living thing. And I wrote this poem. We were an army in cedar, drawn from the ranks of Canada's finest, straight and true, shipped down from the chilly northwest provinces of British Columbia and Alberta, commissioned to serve on upper elevations in a static southwestern exposure, positioned in the southern tier of New York State. We numbered in the thousands and were pressed into service, poised against the harsh elements, standing shoulder to shoulder for almost 2 decades, a whole generation, till our bulk and integrity were nearly worn away. In the end, both uneventfully decommissioned and unceremoniously discharged, we were replaced with others of our own kind, though strong and new. We are soldiers, all of us, measured and cut, purposed and placed, and drafted to a term of service. So I see the shingles like ourselves, you know, like each shingle was a person, and there were an army of shingles.
It lived a life.
Yeah, it had a life.
Right.
And in its first life, it was a tree, and then it was cut into a shingle. A lot of times it ends up as kindling. That's another life.
Yeah.
But I particularly love wood.
And then back to the earth to be mulch for another cedar.
Yeah, just decay and become food for another tree.
It's like the Hans Christian Andersen, the little fir tree.
I don't even know that one. What's that about?
No, it's this Christmas tree that gets chopped down, and then it's just kind of going to die. And it's kind of sad because... Do you know that story?
No.
Oh, okay. But it makes you think that a tree does have a life, and it gives this tree this personality that just, you know, you think, wow, you just chop down trees, but you don't think about it, but they do. They have.
She's a literary one of the two hosts.
No, but we just don't think about how trees, what happens after you chop down a tree and it lives a life and then it becomes something else. And
I have I was at a sawmill right here in Bethel, Pulowski Sawmill.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was buying some flooring for someone, for a customer, and I happened to see these 2 giant, thick oak boards, and I just had to have them. They were just beautiful. You know, you don't see wide, thick wood at any lumber yard. You just see skinny little pieces. Right. And I just bought them and ended up building a table out of them. And I didn't really, it wasn't for myself, it was too big. It was 9 feet long and it weighed a ton. But I thought the boards had a personality and I just wanted them to be something. And so they were a tree, and then they were a table. And so they had lives. And I ended up selling the table to a customer. And I didn't tell him, but I put a plaque under the table with a poem on it. And it told a little bit about the table. And they didn't discover it for 6 months or a year that I had put a little dedication type thing underneath it. And they were quite tickled. And I'll see if I can remember how it goes. I built this table with my bare hands, and for no other reason than my love of wood. 2 slabs from a tall tree that stood many long years in one place. I had no need for a table, but I had to build it. Would that I knew its final destination, perhaps I would have taken more care. So don't look too close. You'll see many imperfections in the table too. The lives of some trees are many. And for my part in this, I hope that those who sit knee to knee across this wooden bridge are connected at the heart and share in life's greatest blessings.
I don't know if I ever thought of a tree or a piece of furniture as being better off for being imperfect. For having, you think of craftsmanship, at least in the sense of, building stock items, and everything's got to be just so, and it can't be off by a quarter of an inch even. But I guess being off by a little bit here and there is what makes a table a table.
Yeah, or the knots in the wood. Or
I purposely, with things like that, I guess with my art or my creativity, I purposely don't try too hard. Because the things I build are like people. They're not perfect either.
Right.
And to try and be perfect is kind of like a distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, to me, the table, the most beautiful thing about that table is that the children who are sitting at that table will remember the table that I built. They'll grow up around my table. Right. And that's what's important. I don't care if the table is, a little crooked, a little irregular. It's a tree. It's irregular.
And then it's a member of the family.
If you want perfect, you get Formica.
Right.
Something.
No, I know.
No, you're right. Nuh-uh. Sorry, no Formica allowed.
But yeah, I love wood. I love wood. And it inspires me to write. I write a lot about things like that, natural things.
At the beginning, when you were learning, had you tried to be perfect and then just kind of had to let that go, or do you think you'd always had that kind of attitude?
No, I wanted to express what I was. I wanted to express a feeling, and for instance, people have said, "Oh, you should take some poetry, classes. You should take some writing classes." I'm kind of stubborn about that. I feel I just put it out there the way it is, maybe raw or with some rough edges, and has its own beauty.
Yeah.
To me, to have the perfect meter and rhythm is a mathematical thing. That's not what I'm after. I'm after a feeling thing.
Right.
That's amazing. I have a friend who works with her hands, and it's very similar to that. There's no absolute way of doing the work that she does. It's all according to how it unfolds, and it's personal. I have someone we know who also does woodworking. He's an engineer.
And for him, the goal is for it to be perfect.
Perfect.
And that's a different goal.
Right.
I mean, for him, that's a personal challenge.
Right.
And I just don't believe in perfection. I just believe that for me, the goal of my writing is to get across a point that is human. Human is not perfect.
So you're all about the feeling.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want somebody to see that irregular is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I want somebody to feel that, having a board with a knothole missing in it is just like yourself. You have parts where you're not quite perfect.
Yeah.
It's okay and it's normal.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So
It really is.
So I find a lot of inspiration just all around me. It's in the natural world.
Would you read another poem? Do you have some other poems there that you can read one of?
I have a short story.
You can read some of that. Tell us what it's about and then read a little bit of it.
It's from my book, Pete Who.
Uh-huh.
And it's a story called Limestone.
Ooh.
And I hitchhiked to Limestone, Maine when I was 16.
There really is a Limestone, Maine?
Yeah, and it smells like limestone. There must be quarries there.
Ah, okay.
There must be quarries. Did you ever notice how a lot of things in life look like a lot of other things in life? In fact, sometimes life is like wallpaper. And if you were to look across it, you would see patterns and repetitions and similarities. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that's all I see is the connection between things and how one thing relates to the whole. Anyway, you just know me as Peter Mullin, but I'm one of 7 children. I'm number 3 in a sequence of 5 boys and 2 girls. It goes Jimmy, Claudie, Peter, Sarah, David, William, and Jason. And I wonder sometimes if my parents didn't think that if you had that many kids and something happened to 1 or 2 of them, it wouldn't be so bad because you'd still have a bunch left. Really. Why else would they let me hitchhike to Canada when I was only 16 years old? So there I was, in the last few fading days of my summer vacation, before I was to return to high school in my sophomore year. I found myself sinking in the quicksand of adolescence, drowning, as it were, in boredom and grasping for an antidote to my teenage frustration and emptiness. I decided to do something spectacular, something that would change my life and validate my existence, or at least something interesting. I decided to hitchhike to Canada. Fortunately, I got a ride from a friend as far as New Hampshire. There I stayed with my cousin Donald for a few days. Now Donald was a bit of an odd fellow. He lived alone, just himself and 15,000 chickens. Donald was a chicken farmer. I remember him saying in his New Hampshire accent, "The worst thing is in the middle of the night when them kids get on snowmobiles and buzz by the chicken house, so's all them chickens get so scared they pile up in a corner and suffocate. Then I got to go in there in the morning and drag out all them dead chickens." Stupid chickens. Well, a day or 2 after that, I was ready to move on. So Donald drove me to the main highway, and I got out, and he pointed me towards Boston. Within a few hours, I was walking around Boston Commons, but I was bored because I didn't know what I went there for in the first place. I only had $100, and I didn't know where I would spend the night. I was on my way, but I didn't know where I was going. There was no plan, no map, no cell phone, just me. So I stuck out my thumb, and a young Army recruit in a black Camaro pulled over and picked me up. "Where are you heading?" he said. "I don't know, Canada, I guess." "Hop in," he said. He turned on the radio. We talked for a while, and eventually I dozed off. The next thing I know, it's 12 o'clock, midnight. He pulled over, stopped the car. "This is it, fella, end of the line." So I stepped out and thanked him and slammed the door, and he sped off into the night. Now I'm left standing there in the lamplight on a cold, damp, late August night on Main Street in Limestone, Maine. The night air even smells like limestone. This is a one-horse town on the Canadian border, and there is no one around. No traffic, no stores open, not even lights on in any of the houses. Everyone here is asleep, and the only sound is the din of the interstate far off. My first thought is my family back home, all snug in their beds and sleeping comfortably. Little do they know that I'm standing here in the cold, alone. I could be murdered tonight, and my family would never think to look for the body in this little northern town. It was weird. I'd never been so far from home, nor felt so alone. Not afraid, just on my own and completely responsible for myself with no familiar surroundings and no one to talk to. Anyway, I think I have to find a place to sleep, but there's nothing around, just a U-Haul trailer, the kind you pull behind your car. So I climbed in and laid down on the hard, sloped plywood floor, but I can't sleep. It was so chilly, and I'm wide awake. So I got up and went out and looked around a little bit and found an unlocked car. So I crawled in the back seat. Well, it's more comfortable in there, but I'm not. I'm afraid someone's going to find me and I'll get in trouble. So I wander the quiet side streets and the dark back streets of Limestone. Then I come upon an all-night laundromat. But still, there's no one in there, just bright fluorescent lights and hard, high-gloss enamel benches, like in high school gym lockers. But at least it's warm in there, and I lie down on one of the benches and fall asleep for an hour or two. But I wake up restless, like I don't belong there. So I get up again, walk out into the street, and start heading east out of town. As the sun rose over the horizon, I crossed over into Canada. The Border Patrol didn't mind my jar of honey in my knapsack, but they didn't like my big pocket knife. Still, they let me keep it. Next, I followed a road that ran along the U.S.-Canadian border. It was barren, open farmland, and not very exciting. After walking 4 or 5 hours without a single ride, I'd gotten discouraged. I don't know what I expected to find up there in Canada. Maybe I was only stretching my wings and pushing myself out of the nest, clocking as many miles as I could, thinking that distance would change something. But I was tired, so I crossed back over the border, climbed onto a Greyhound bus, closed my eyes, and just went home. Now, the whole Limestone, Maine thing was a great adventure for a young kid, but I was struck by how I was able to just roll into town one night and then disappear, and no one ever saw my face. Nobody knew that in the last few fading days of the summer of 1970, a young boy from New York, a young boy in search of himself, slipped into town and slipped out again, and no one ever noticed him. That was 36 years ago, and yes, I've grown up some. I've also learned how to get along in this world, though the truth is I still don't know what the heck I'm doing here. I'm still searching, still wandering, but one thing gnaws at me. One reoccurring thought has followed me all these years after Limestone, and it's this. Maybe I'll slip into this world as if on kitten's feet, and I'll wander around a while, and then I'll die, and barely anyone will really know that I spent a lifetime here.
Wow.
Talk about living in the moment.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So I do poetry and writing.
What a moment.
Wow.
Yeah, I love the writing. It's a passion.
Wouldn't people that actually were there and that you slipped past in and slipped past out just love to know what they missed?
Yeah.
And you to have stepped into a world that was so alien to you, but at the same time there was a comfort level. And then back out. Have you ever taken your lovely wife back up there?
No, but my daughter, 20 years after myself, went to a rock concert in Limestone, Maine. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, that was revisited.
Limestone revisited. She'll have to write her story of her experience in Limestone.
But it's great. I mean, it's, to me, everybody has these adventures.
Oh yeah.
I mean, maybe everybody doesn't hitchhike like that, but you have stuff, and a lot of times, after a few years, you have a different perspective on it. And if you look back at it and think about it, you see how it shapes who you are. Sometimes you don't think about that, but it does.
Yeah.
And I think there's always a story of how you got where you are. And I think very often they're intriguing stories, and I think we should share them.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote the book. More so than to get published and make $1 million was to say how the old stuff makes you who you are.
Yeah.
Well, if somebody wrote a book and changed the lives of 1 million people this much, you might have had 20 people read your story, and you've changed their lives this much. And what a difference. What a difference. What a change you can make in another person by sharing things. Sharing things that have happened to you.
Yeah.
Oh, it's true how when you look back at those stories, it does say a lot about who you are.
Yeah, they made you who you are. And sometimes it might not be clear to you until you go back and think about it or write it. That's why memoir writing, I think, is a great thing. It helps you to realize how you became who you are.
Yeah.
Even if you just do it for yourself, sometimes you write about your growing up, your parents.
Right.
It helps you to appreciate and be clear on where you came from.
Right.
What are some of the family experiences you had with your six siblings?
Or 7.
What,
Oh,
7.
yeah, 6.
Six siblings,
Yeah. What were the dynamics? I mean, were the oldest to the youngest, was there anything special? Because I know my 3 kids, very different one from the other. Even the 2 girls, Sarah and Kimberly, who were just 3.5 years apart, and yet very different.
Yeah. The thing that jumps out is my younger siblings had a completely different experience because in the early years we had an inheritance and the times were good. And by the time the younger siblings came along, the money was gone and things were not good. And my version of my family is the Waltons.
Right.
That's how it was for me. And by the time the last 2 or 3 of my younger brothers came, it was not so pleasant. And
well, I don't know, but it may not have been as pleasant financially, but I'm sure there were other things, other experiences that